Hey folks, hello internet. You're gonna have to pardon me if this video is a little bit grainy or whatever. It's obviously dark, and I increased the brightness just a little bit so you can see me. I also found the setting in the Facebook app that lets me mirror this image horizontally, so those of you who felt like it looked like I was driving on the wrong side of the road, let me know if you think this looks or feels correct. All right, so I have a couple minutes while I'm going from one place to another. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and the New Jersey is preparing for like 1.5 feet of snow, or like 13 inches of snow or something. So I got some stuff to do. But in any case, I got a great response last video when we were talking about books, and so I wanted to follow up on that thread. We're talking mostly about books here in this thread from me that influenced my thinking as a young man. So, for instance, The Dark Tower, which is an incredibly influential book in my life, I didn't come across that until later in life. So I can't, it doesn't fit in this 13 to 16, 17-year-old time frame, which is kind of what I'm talking about, though I may be misremembering the exact years a little bit. I do know that right in here is Lord of the Rings. So let's talk about that next. First, we talked about Foundation, which sort of stands in for a number of Asimov works and gave me this idea of humanity as a quantifiable, thinking about large populations instead of just individuals. And if anything, Lord of the Rings brought to me a romanticized view, or an idyllic view of duty. Not honor, though honor plays a large part of that. It was more duty, and in two directions. Tolkien was big on, as someone from England who firmly believed in the British aristocracy and sort of grew up at that time when the relationship between an officer and his footman was a critical backbone of the British military. Tolkien truly believed that there were great men, and that these men both deserved your loyalty and then owed to you their best, that they would endeavor to be worthy of your service, and that they would not give in to their craven impulses. They would not give in to cowardice. They would not run away when normal men might, that it was in fact beholden upon them to live up to your view of them. It wasn't explicitly stated that way, and that's not really strictly accurate to what he's saying, but I want to get that idea across. And nowhere is this relationship stronger than in the emerging connection between Aragorn and Boromir. You look at you look at the way this characterization develops, and here you have a man who is slated to rule, but maybe doesn't really have within him really feel like he has everything it takes to be in line for the throne of Gondor, though he's not really the guy who's going to go next. And you have Aragorn, who widely, by every account, has every right to rule, but has no intention of doing so at this point in the book. But there's always within Aragorn this idea that you will do the right thing. You will turn away from the easy choice, and you'll do the right thing. And this is shown in the loyalty that he inspires in those around him, the people who will follow him. And there are a number of kings in Lord of the Rings, and we can really think of that novel actually as a story of kings. If you look at the dwarf kings, both old and current, those are men who those are characters who have sort of failed their tests. They fall to greed, they fall to indulgence, they fall to ruin, they fall to ego. And you have the elf kings who fall to sort of apathy and cowardice in their own way. They withdraw from the world, they withdraw from the fight, and simply attempt to avoid the fray. You have, and it just goes on like that. You have arguably, the king of the wizards, or the wizard king, who fails to fight and joins the enemy. You have the human kings who fall to really incompetence more than any other failing that they fall to. They fall to greed, they fall to hubris, they fall to apathy, but far and away, the biggest problem with humans in the eyes of Tolkien is that the vast majority of them are simply not wise. They're impulsive and shallow, and they don't think far enough ahead. With the exception of Aragorn, who, in his own way, sort of gathers the best of all of those races. He shows a vision of the future and a respect for nature that would earns him the loyalty of wizards. He shows the strength and the mettle in the darkness that you need to sort of be a dwarven king. He winds up with sort of a vision for the future and a long-term ability to sacrifice and love that brings the elves to him. So if you look at that from that perspective, Aragorn is sort of the living embodiment of sort of the older kings. He spans the weaknesses that are shown by the other kings in the novel. And I was deeply struck by that. I was struck by both Aragorn's quiet strength and his willingness in the end to sigh and put his head down and simply say, fine. It's the right thing to do. It's not what I wanted, but this is what I'm going to be. And to rise to that. And in that same way, I think the most powerful moment in The Lord of the Rings is the death of Boromir. And pardon me if I get that character name wrong. There are a lot of similar names in the book. So if I turned out to lose a little bit of my Tolkien credibility, whatever, deal with it, right? So, and basically it comes down to this idea that Boromir, and I'm just going to keep using the name, falls after a moment of weakness, in a moment of redemption. He falls protecting what's left of the Fellowship. And he does it in an almost samurai act of not suicide, but he knows there's a moment when he could run, and he doesn't run, and he knows it almost certainly means his death, and he does it anyway. And in that moment, at the very end, and the movie does this wonderfully, if you only want to see this scene in the movie, and there's Sean Bean doing what Sean Bean does in movies, which is die. And there's Sean Bean sort of, at the end of his last breath. And what he most wants to convey, what he most wants before he passes, is to convey to a worthy leader his loyalty. He doesn't want to die as a failed aspirant to a throne. He doesn't want to die as a craven man who cracked in a moment of weakness. What he wants to do is pass. He wants to pass as a man who offers his loyalty to someone worthy of that loyalty, and most importantly is accepted as such. And that's critical to him. The acceptance. That's his confession. That's his act of absolution. That's how he passes, feeling like he has accomplished something. And it is that moment that Aragorn rises to his birthright. Not because really of the potential deaths of thousands, not because of the fate of Middle-earth hanging in the balance, though I like to think that in the end he would have risen anyway. It's this moment, this realization that whether he likes it or not, whether he desires it or not, that the people around him will die wanting that thing that he can give them, that only he can give them, which is the acceptance into the service of someone they consider worthy of that service. And it is at that time that he decides to trust them, that if they feel he's worthy of that level of devotion, that he's going to take on that mantle, and he is going to do that to the best of his ability. And all through that book, there are men in that novel. And I know there are women, and there are strong women, but as a young boy growing up, at the time, my father had already passed at that point, and in fact passed before I was born. So I really never had that figure, though I had a grandfather who was an amazing figure, and I was surrounded by great people. So this is not a woe is me thing. I'm just saying, to a boy who's looking for an archetype for masculinity and manhood, for an idea of what's right and what's not right, you could do worse, much worse, than the relationship between Aragorn and the Sons of Gondor. They're great characters for that. They're not perfect, they're fictional characters, and they're better than most in that they're flawed and they're human. But I'm not saying that you live your life trying to be a fictional character. I'm saying fiction, when it's right, great fiction, provides you an archetype. It provides you a template. And in the case of Lord of the Rings, it was not magic. It was not fighting dragons. It was not the sweeping battle scenes. That trilogy is not defined by that for me. That trilogy is that moment alone in a wood with two men, Aragorn and the dying warrior, who needs the acceptance of a king, who needs to know that his death is not alone. There's no way that didn't change me. I knew it when I read it, and I've known it since. And my life is an understanding of these hierarchies. And it's the topic for an entire other discussion. Different times in my life, which of those roles I play, and in which contexts. But that's the world. To me, the world is divided into those, in any given context. One person is not these things universally, but in any given context, there are those who deserve your loyalty, and those who give you their loyalty, that you need to be worthy of that. And those who are not part of either of those things, not even to you personally, but those people who don't see the world in those shifting bonds of loyalty, it's not that I don't have a use for them. I simply have no mechanism for understanding what motivates them or relating to them in any significant way. So they're sort of side characters in the world. And again, I'm not saying that they need to owe me devotion or I need to owe devotion to them. But if I can't understand what someone is devoted to, if I can't understand how someone aspires to be worthy of the devotion that others place in them, then I don't know what motivates them. And it makes me distrustful of them. And that loyalty that they're attempting to be worthy of might be friends, it might be business associates, it might be the world around them at large, it might be their children, it might be their wife or their boyfriend or their husband or their girlfriend, whoever. If you do not feel the weight of responsibility of those who look up to you, I don't understand you. I don't understand you. In any case, that's Lord of the Rings for me. Yes, I love Gandalf's arc. Yes, I love the image of Minas Tirith. Yes, I love the battles, and there are so many fantastic characters throughout that, and there are so many people in there to learn from, and Tolkien was masterful. But in the end, Lord of the Rings is two guys in the woods watching one of them die. And I don't know what else to say about the book. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and look up the scene. Sean Bean, Death in the Woods, or Sean Bean Dies, Lord of the Rings will get you there. And if that doesn't do it, if you don't want to watch that part of the novel, then go read the book again. In any case, so that's Lord of the Rings in the context of this series of vlogs. And we will be talking next about, I don't know, we might talk Dune. We might talk, it'll probably be getting on about time to talk about Fountainhead and or Atlas Shrugged. So I'm going to go do what I got to do and get home before, in time to settle in for the snow. I have a lot of code to write tonight. I probably have a herd watching episode to do. We have a lot to talk about politically. For those of you that have been participating in the discussion that goes along with these posts, I really appreciate it. I love your feedback. I love the book list that you've been putting in there. There are some in there that I had never thought about that I've added to my list. And there are some people I've had a chance to discuss books that we both know well. Everybody else, take it easy. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I will catch you all next time. Bye-bye.